Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of We Read It One Night. And we are having back on the podcast today the first guest that we ever had on a podcast. And I'm so excited to have her join us today. Please introduce yourself.
First of all, I had no idea, or I had forgotten somehow that I was your first ever guest. So I'm feeling very honored. I am Alison Cochrun. I write queer romance novels, including The Charm Offensive, Kiss Her Once for Me, Here We Go Again, and then my upcoming book, Every Step She Takes.
Amazing. And I realized I forgot to introduce myself. So I'm Allison, in case this is your first time tuning in. We're both Allisons, which is why obviously you had to be like the first guest.
Had to be. We're both Allisons with one L. It's like fate.
Right, exactly. So you are, I feel like, one of like the bigger queer writers of our current time. That sounds so pretentious. Writers of our time. Not for you. That's the way I phrased it. Sounded weird in my head as it was coming out. But I wanted to bring you on to kind of talk about queer romance, but then like specifically because your upcoming book, Every Step She Takes, which I just finished the audiobook and it's amazing. And I felt personally attacked in a good way, but like personally attacked by Sadie and Mel as characters. I was like, did Alison Cochrun act as like my therapist notes or like what's going on?
That's how I write all my books.
Right. Just like, yeah. Uh, but so I wanted to get you on to talk about like also older heroines. And I say older heroines in quotes because when I talk about, I feel like when most people talk about older heroines, we're talking about like 30 plus, which is not old. And half of our listeners are 30 plus. So, but in romance and books in general, older than 30 is older. And that's a big theme in, your upcoming book, especially is finding yourself at, I think she just turns 35 at the beginning of the book. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about older heroines and how that ties into like queer romance and why it's so important that we see that in queer romance. And then maybe we can like recommend some older heroine books
Ooh.
for.
I'll have to actually think hard about that. So good to know.
It's the same thing as introducing yourself, listener. Right before we recorded, I was like, Allison, you're going to introduce yourself. And, you momentarily had like a panic. And I feel like recommending books is the same thing. It's like, oh, yeah, I read. Oh, what do you read? Like, do you have anything to recommend? And then it's like, I've actually never read a book
Nope,
ever.
every title
My entire
just
life.
leaves my head. Yep.
A 404 era fully.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, what inspired you to write about an older heroine, like a, late 30s to late 30s heroines, like in
Yeah.
this upcoming book?
Well, I'm in my late 30s,
Yes.
so that's part of it. I'm 38, and both don't feel old at all. And also, like we talked about before we started recording, I'm 6 months pregnant and feeling very old at the moment because my body is like breaking down. But generally speaking, I do not think that 38 is all that old. But so that was part of it, is just wanting to write about characters my own age. But the other part was I wanted to write like a, also in air quotes, like later in life coming out story. Because that is also my personal experience. Like I didn't come out as gay until I was 33. So just like 2 years before the character Sadie does in the book. And I knew that I wanted to write about a character in her 30s who is figuring out her sexuality like for the first time, like has not questioned it before, and is on that journey. And so it just ended up being that as I sat down to kind of pitch my fourth book to my editor, that I was like, okay, I think it's time to open up the journal that I kept in March of 2020 and write about a woman who's navigating that.
And I appreciate it about the book that it wasn't because of some like religious trauma. That would apply like to me. And it was like unthinkable growing up, like in the teens. It was like, oh, don't even consider that. Like, no, I'm not checking out that girl's butt. Like, I'm just jealous of her. I'm just insecure. Um, and it was really nice for me because I feel like the times that I have read sort of later in life, queer awakenings has been from that lens. And it was, I think, really valid. Like, it would be really validating to read that from the lens of just like, no, like I like Sadie gets in her own way, and she also has all those sort of mini microaggressions that she experiences growing up against queer people that sort of get her in her own way. And I don't really know where I was going with that, but just to say that it was it felt like a really new and nuanced perspective.
which is fun because again, it's just my life.
Yeah.
There's like a little bit of religious trauma in my past during my like very intense like youth group phase in middle school,
Yes.
but overwhelmingly like on paper and like Sadie experiences this too. There was no reason for me not to know that I
Hmm.
was queer. Like I have gay aunts. Like I knew that my parents like they never said comments that I internalized about gay people. Like I
Right.
always knew that they were, accepting and loving of everyone. Like I had friends in college who like came out and I was like, there alongside them, supporting them in that journey.
Hmm.
I like live outside
Being an
of Portland,
ally
Oregon.
to
Yeah,
them.
exactly. Like there was just no reason for me not to know. And
Yeah.
so that was such a huge obstacle for me in figuring it all out. Is I was like, well, no,
Yeah.
like there's no way I could be queer because like I'm intelligent, like I'm somewhat self-aware, like
Yeah.
I would know. I would already have figured this out. If I was going
Hmm.
to figure it out, it would have happened a long time ago. And that was something that, like, when I first started questioning, definitely got in my way. Like you're saying about Sadie, is that it was just like, well, no, I would know. So
Right.
I just need to dismiss that and like keep trying to
Yeah.
date men, because that's like obviously without
Yeah.
outside the realm of possibility. There's no reason, um, yeah, for me to be so oblivious.
Right. Right. And I feel like it's and especially like an important topic in like queer romance and then within the context of a romance novel because I feel like a lot of the times in romance, especially with like heroines in their 20s and even like early 30s, like there are a lot of times in contemporary romance especially is an element of like self-discovery to that romance, like part of the emotional journey that the person goes on with their love interest, like is what do I want to do with my life and what do I want to do and blah 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 blah. But like and like maybe they have a disaster love life, but they kind of always know like what they want. It's just finding the right person, right? And so we recognize that that's like a core story for a lot of readers and writers in romance. But I feel like it's not as common for from like a sexuality and like even a romance like perspective to have the primary journey really be like figuring that out, when you should ostensibly have stuff figured out.
Yeah, which is funny because I feel like, and especially, it's sort of a cliche, but like a lot of people figured out their sexuality like during the pandemic.
Hmm.
I know so many people who, especially like people who were raised or socialized as women coming out as bisexual during the pandemic,
Hmm.
like so common. And it was
Hmm.
mostly happening with people who were like in their, late 20s to late 30s. And so I feel like at the time that I was struggling with questioning my sexuality, I felt like I was the only one.
Yeah.
Like nobody else possibly could be going through this because again, they all would have figured it out already,
Yeah.
like in college, like self-respecting millennials. Um, and I hadn't. And so, but then after, I started writing queer romance after it came out, I realized that like I was not unique at all.
Hmm.
And it was actually a super common experience for a lot of people.
So why do you think that we don't really talk about that as much, like in queer circles, in queer romance, in
I, I think like if we're talking about in queer romance, one thing I hear from readers a lot is that they are tired of coming out stories.
hmm
And I think that that is extremely valid
yeah,
because if you look at queer media as a whole, and talking television
right,
and movies and books, like overwhelmingly we see coming out stories.
right.
And that is like one small, though pivotal aspect of the queer experience, but it's like not all there is to the queer experience. And so I understand why so many queer readers are like hungry for other representation.
Hmm.
And so I think that's kind of part of it. I think queer writers too are hungry for a different sort of representation
Hmm.
aside from just coming out stories. But I think I also get a little bit defensive about coming out stories because while like I read back when I was an ally, I read like hundreds of, like YA coming out stories, right?
Yeah,
And like coming out
right.
stories about teenagers and young adults. But I hadn't ever read one about someone who
Hmm.
was older, someone who has seemingly life figured out, but doesn't
Hmm.
know this thing about themselves. And so I think, while I agree, we do need just more queer stories in general, and definitely
Right.
queer stories that have nothing to do with coming out or grappling with coming out and acceptance of sexuality. I also think there are certain coming out stories that we haven't seen as much and
Hmm.
haven't been represented, and so I really wanted to write a story that honestly like would have been helpful for me to see
Hmm.
a few years ago when I felt like such a weirdo for not knowing.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, it all comes back to like that. I mean, it's a curse, not just for queer romance, but like in general, books in general, like in publishing, they're like, oh, we've already done all that. We already have all these books telling this story. And it's like, okay, but you don't have it from this perspective. You don't have it from this, less common perspective that many readers are thirsting for, maybe without even kind of realizing that like that's something that they would enjoy reading.
Yeah.
Do you think I feel like and this is another situation in which I have these thoughts and then I immediately forget every book I've ever read and I can't come up with any examples, but I feel like in general, heroines have been getting older, sort of on average. I don't know, I'm just like thinking of the popular book, even just popular sort of straight romance that's been coming out. I'm thinking of like Emily Henry. I feel like almost all of her heroines are in their 30s. Or Abby Jimenez. I feel like she's had older heroines in general. Like, do you think the average age? And when I say going up, I mean like late 20s as opposed to
Yeah.
like 22.
It's interesting. I feel like it does depend a lot on the author and what kind of romance. Like Abby Jimenez, like when you said that, I was like, oh, that's right. Because I feel like a lot of her heroines are in a more like established place in their lives, right? Where
Hmm.
they're like, and we see this a lot in romance where like the heroine is like super confident at work, right? Like she's
Hmm.
kicking ass like in her job and her career. She's like got amazing friends. Like she is doing super great in all these aspects of her life, but like this one thing that is missing
Right.
is this connection for, kind of whatever her flaw or her wound might be that is
Right.
preventing her from finding the romantic love that she desires. And so I do feel like that's common, but I also, and I don't know, maybe it's because I am 38, but I
Hmm.
feel like I open so many romance novels and the heroine will be like, oh, I'm just like, I'm too old to be in this chaotic place. I'm like 28. Um, and like, I would have said the same thing at 28, right? So
Hmm.
like it is realistic, but I always am just like, you're not old. 28 is just
You got
not
time.
like, it's not old. You don't need to be like
No.
finding your forever person right this second. Like, I remember feeling that way,
Hmm.
but also like, I don't know. I sometimes, yeah, sometimes that's like a part of romance that I think as an older reader takes me out
Hmm.
of the story just a little bit.
Hmm.
And maybe part of that's my own experiences. Plenty of people get married at 28. Plenty of people are
Right.
married before 28 and like
Right.
all, like everybody is on a different timeline. But for me, as someone who's just like a hot mess at 28, um, I'm like, girl, take a chill pill. Like it's fine. Like
Hmm.
you'll be okay. You're practically still a teenager, which is how it feels like
No,
right
I
now.
mean, listen, as a 28-year-old,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
no, 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 no. I was like this whole time, I was like, this is correct. I was like, yes. Like, I don't disagree with it. I'm like, first of all, I'm just a baby. Like, I don't know what you're talking
Yeah.
about. I'm
Yeah.
13 years old. Like, I don't know why you're asking me to pay health insurance. Um, but I do like there's like this contrast of like understanding intellectually that I am 28 and that especially nowadays, like so many people are still figuring it out in their third, I mean, are still figuring out for decades after that, but like that there's no reason to, quote unquote, settle down now just for the sake of it. But also emotionally, I'm like, I have nothing to my name. I'm like, I'm the Charlotte Lucas meme from like 2005 Pride and Prejudice. I'm like, I'm 27 years old. I have no money and no prospects, and I'm already a burden to my parents. Like, like, and I think there's like a larger conversation to be had about that kind of stuff, about how I and you like are not unique in not having
Yeah.
it all figured out by 28 and not finding our forever part. Like I'm single as a Pringle, and that's fine. But like you don't have to have it all figured out. It would be insane to expect someone to have even most of it figured out at 28. But then at the same time, like we live in an ageist society and, women start losing their currency, or
God.
whatever, our
I mean, yeah.
value. I like it's the interesting sort of I feel like emotional holdover of even just a few decades ago when like the average age of marriage was like 24 or something and like now it's like 29. I don't know. I don't know what it is. If you're a
Yeah.
statistician, please don't
I
kill me.
I feel like
It's
those
something.
those felt like realistic made up
Yeah.
statistics
It,
though.
it feels like about then. And like when I was growing up, I was like, yeah, I'll be married by 25. Of course.
Of
That'll be a little bit
course.
old. I'm going to be an older bride and I'll be married by 25. Of course. But
Obviously.
right. So like we have that contrast of where like women especially are sort of understanding that like you don't have to like rush into all these life milestones. But then we still have most of our books like talking about essentially featuring the stories of heroines in their 20s that are now figuring, you know what I mean? That like they're
Yeah.
you're telling the story that's sort of counter to the narrative of what is actually happening in real life. And like, like will we see that change as sort of like literature catches up, or is it sort of like the last holdout?
Yeah, and I don't know. And again, like for a lot of people that is like I felt that way at 28. So I don't think it's unrealistic because internally like that was the story I was telling myself. And so I totally relate to that. I think part of it for me too is I just when it comes to writing, I like writing just like messy ass people. Like I
Hmm.
am not great at writing the like confident career woman character as much as I love to read that character in like a Ken Ryan book or like Jasmine Guillory, like all these amazing authors who write like these just like badass self-possessed women.
Hmm.
I tend to gravitate more toward these characters who are essentially having coming of age experiences, just at different ages than what we
Hmm.
typically see.
And I think it's interesting to look at, if we accept that perhaps the average age of like the heroine has gone up slightly, at the same time that we have like the college romance trend and that being really popular among adults. I think that, the new adult is ostensibly supposed to be like the gateway between like YA and adult romance, but like it's popular all around. And so, why are we having this thirst for younger protagonists doing all of the things that older protagonists are doing? I mean, like the college age romances, they end with basically the same way an adult romance would, you know what I mean? It's not like we're a YA romance where you're like, oh, we're gonna go to prom, but like who knows if we'll be together in 10
Yeah.
years. Like the college age romance, it's like, okay, we're graduating, we're getting married, we're having kids. The epilogue is like 20 years and whatever. So I guess I like what are your thoughts on those sort of conflicting trends?
I'm gonna be real with you. I don't think I have read like a single college age romance except
Yeah.
maybe like Red, White, and Royal Blue, which feels like it barely counts, but the characters are
Yeah.
like 21 and 22. Um, but I don't tend to read, like, I don't know of a lot of like sapphic literature that is set in college. I would love to read it. Like, that sounds fantastic.
Hmm.
But so I personally am like totally clueless about the entire like new adult sphere. I do feel like I will say this in advocating for younger protagonists in romance is that sometimes when you're writing, the age of your characters becomes like sort of necessitated by the concept of your story,
Hmm.
right? Like I am working on my fifth book right now. And I like want the characters to be 40 so badly. Like I want to write this book where like the main characters are all 40. And I am like trying, but the concept I have, like, and it just kind of works better if they're like a whole decade younger.
Yeah.
And it just kind of makes more sense because it's got like some second chance romance elements,
Yeah.
if we're like a little bit closer to the original events. And so,
Yeah.
uh, as much as I want to write a book with 40-year-old protagonists, like who knows, like I might end up changing that
Right.
and making them
Right.
younger just for the logistics of the book. And I think that happens in a lot of cases. Like I think sometimes plot will just necessitate younger characters, or like it is easier to sell a concept with younger characters,
Hmm.
especially because like we always see, I feel like this really blew my mind before my first book even came out. This is like a really weird story, but I think I don't know if you've ever read like Jen DeLuca has her like
Hmm.
Renaissance Fair series. And I think the
Yes.
first one is called Well Matched, but honestly,
Yes.
like it has been a really long time.
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
But I believe the protagonist is like 26 or something. And at the time, I like was just getting on Instagram because I was like had sold my book and was trying to figure out how authors exist on Instagram. And I remember someone saying like Jen DeLuca was responding to someone who was like, your characters do not act 26. They act so young. And I remember seeing that and being like, holy shit, like 26 is so young. Like I was at the
Yeah.
time writing like I think in my first book the characters are like 27 and 28.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, everyone is going to think they're so young because like I wrote them poorly. Because they are, messy and they're funny and they're so
Yeah.
right. Like, and so I think there can be a lot of pushback from readers about what they expect from
Hmm.
protagonists based on age. And I think sometimes that does make it more, it makes it just easier to write characters in the 20s.
Yeah.
I think you can get away with more.
Yeah. They can be a little more toxic, a little more messy.
They can be messy, they can be figuring their shit out. Yeah, like it kind of gives you that opportunity to do that without as much, I think, like potential reader pushback, whether it would be there or
Hmm.
not. Um, but I do think, yeah, I think sometimes the genre as a whole just makes it easier to write younger characters. So
Yeah.
um, I don't blame people for writing younger characters
Yeah.
at all. And I think we see too, like especially with romantasy, being such a
Yeah.
huge part of the romance genre. Like to me, romantasy is so connected to like young adult fantasy, and it's like
Twilight. Yeah.
yeah, like kind of like it's like the young adult fantasy we grew up reading, but with sex, right? And
Hmm.
so I feel like those books often center around like super special 16-year-olds, right? And so it's not
Yeah.
surprising that like romantasy also tends to focus on characters in their earlier 20s, right? Or
Yeah.
these like younger characters, because it is kind of that bridge back to the books
Right.
that nostalgic factor for those books that we
Yeah.
read when we were teenagers.
Yeah. It's all the like fan fiction that we looked up after. Like we read the favorite fantasy books and we were like, there's
Yeah,
no sex in this. So we looked up the fan fiction and this time they're just publishing. They're just going right to the fan fiction.
exactly. And so I think, yeah, I don't know. I guess that's all just a justification for writing young protagonists,
Yeah.
even as I'm trying to like write this book about 40-year-olds. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I mean it's definitely true that like publishing like characters tend to skew younger. Which is like funny when you think about like the average age of a romance reader, like a book buyer, like they're in their 30s and 40s and 50s. Like quote unquote older people are the ones with the most purchasing power here, just from like a publishing business like standpoint.
Mhm.
But so you would think that those readers would be like more understanding that someone who's in their late 30s or like 40s could be like messy and acting like it, but like they don't want to see that. Like why don't we want to see that in our older characters? Like is it just part of the fantasy of like
I think it
romance?
is. I think it is part of the fantasy, right? And I think, and we see this a lot in conversations about like diversity in romance, but that like
Hmm.
there's this idea that the average romance reader just wants like escapism, right?
Right.
Like they just want to read something that like doesn't make them think about the real world. And we see that like used to justify a lot of like uh, narrow reading
Hmm.
in terms of like reading about characters of different races and different backgrounds,
Hmm.
reading queer characters. But I think like I think I try to intentionally read as diversely as I can. And to me, like I still want escapism. Like those aren't
Hmm.
mutually exclusive things to me. And
Yeah.
so I get that element of reading romance and wanting to, I don't know, there's something about the fantasy of younger characters, right? I think
Hmm.
even when you're older, it's like a reimagining of your own
Yeah.
like youth or own missed experiences or own like,
Yeah.
I don't know, you could be this like young, like sexually attractive person. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there is something about the like catharsis of putting yourself into those characters. But I also think that the focus on romance as escapism, like, is sort of detrimental to like the genre as a whole,
Hmm.
and to like having inclusive stories.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because one of the main criticisms of the romance genre is that it's just silly little like mommy porn, to use the common phrase. But and so when we as readers are, I mean, essentially doing the anti-romance crowd's work for them by feeding into the narrative in a lot of specifically like, oh, it's just escapism. I don't want to think about it. Like, I just want to read my silly little books, and have my silly little time. And so I guess it's just like about finding the balance because there's nothing wrong to a certain extent with just being like, I just want to read this book and switch my brain off and I don't want to think about anything. But then it's like, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, I mean, I have nothing against. I mean, mommy porn is like, like dismissive and sort of like label, but like I have nothing against mommy porn. Like I have nothing against
Yeah.
like moms wanting to like get their
Oh
rocks
yeah.
off reading a
Oh
romance
yeah.
novel at all. And I think like, you know, the reason that romance is often mocked and dismissed is simply because women enjoy it. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I just I feel I feel like I took us on a tangent a little bit, but I just think that um as valid as it is to want that escapism, I think
Yeah.
it's used as an excuse to publish like predominantly white
Hmm.
cis het romance novels as
Hmm.
if like that is all that escapism can be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was, do you know the Instagram account Romancing the Data?
No, I don't. Oh, yes, wait, maybe I do.
She just does like data collections of like various things in like romance. So like she does like a weekly New York Times bestseller like recap and she like breaks everything down by like genre and subgenre and like backlist versus frontlist and everything. And on one of the things that she did this week was it was like she did like a breakdown of how many BIPOC romance books there were on the list, how many queer books and how many like disabled books. And it was like something like 14% of the books were BIPOC and then it was 0% for like queer and disabled. And
Yeah, that sounds
it
right.
yeah, and it's really disheartening
I mean, it sounds
to see.
wrong. I meant right, like
Yes.
correct.
Yeah.
Like, yes, that is what we see reflected on the New York
Correct.
Times is that like the New York
Yeah.
Times, especially like romance novels that are on the New York Times bestseller list are like predominantly white.
Hmm.
Um, and so that unfortunately is not surprising. Um, but yeah, I should see that I still follow romancing the data. I feel like I remember that.
It's interesting to look at that kind of data. It's not surprising, like you said, like that's how publishing currently works. And I guess like, I feel like the obvious next steps to correcting that kind of stuff is like, okay, well, you buy the books that you want published more and you promote those books X and X. But when you think about how the New York Times bestseller list is curated, it's not just the 10 bestsellers, they pick and choose. Ostensibly, how the market is supposed to work is that it responds to what consumers want, but then at the same time, you have like the major voice in publishing, the New York Times, in some ways making like a conscious effort to exclude.
Yeah, I will say, like to kind of close out the topic. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think ultimately, like the system of publishing is to blame, right? That
Yes.
like um, publishing gets to choose which stories it buys and then which
Yeah.
stories it promotes and which stories it puts money behind. A lot of times, like what gets a book on the New York Times bestseller list, as we know, is that publisher support. And like these books that have sprayed edges, these books that have like a
Yeah.
full like 10 city tour
Hmm.
connected to the release, like publishing has the power to popularize diverse stories and they choose not to. As much as we can do as individual readers and authors and bookstagrammers. And it is important that we are um, consciously reading
Hmm.
diversely and promoting diversely. But I think ultimately, like the publishing apparatus is makes it really difficult. Like for us to see just different kinds of stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And it's all about like it's about discoverability. So that was depressing a little bit. So I think maybe if we want to switch to recommending some queer books and books with specifically with older heroines, like 30 plus. I can go first if you want, like,
Okay, start us off with some 30 plus heroine books because I think recently I have not been reading books with older protagonists. And so I have therefore forgotten any that exist.
yeah, so therefore you've never read them ever.
I've never read one.
Right,
No.
exactly. Exactly. So my first recommend we did actually the first book in this series on the podcast, but it's the Feminine Pursuit series by Olivia Waite.
Oh,
I know the
yes.
first one, I think only one of the heroines in the first one is over 30, but I think the second two, like they're both firmly like 30. I think one of them is maybe like 40 plus too. And those are
Nice.
historical romances, listener. And we did The Lady's Guide to Celestial Mechanics. That's the
I love
first
that
one that
book.
we did. Yes,
Yeah.
it's so.
I think you do see, like, it's interesting. I've read a couple historical romance novels where the characters are a little bit older.
Yeah.
Like I just read Sure Thing by Joanna Wool, and I love that
Hmm.
book. It was so good. And I don't remember the exact age of the female protagonist, but I know that she was older and like
Hmm.
they were able to sort of, the author was able to get away with that in a historical because she was widowed. So
Yeah.
she had been married,
Hmm.
and like within, I think it's a Victorian book, but within that culture, like being widowed afforded her a lot of like freedoms to
Right.
pursue
Luxuries.
her botany. She was like a botanist.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think you see that sometimes in historical romance. I think that's really, I love
Yeah.
I don't know. I love older heroines in historical romance because, of course, usually they're like 19. Or to go back to
But
Charlotte
even
Lucas,
they're
like,
like, oh, I'm an old maid at
yeah,
25. And you're
yes,
like, oh.
yeah, exactly.
It's funny that you talk that we were talking about widows because like in the Feminine Pursuit series, like the first book, the one heroine is a widow. In I think the second book, maybe it's I think it's the second book, one of them is like in a lavender marriage, so basically a widow, like her husband slash friend is like a sailor, so he's never there, so basically a
Yeah.
widow. And then like I think there's a widow in the third one. Like they're all widows, and it's
Well, because that was
funny
like the
how
only
that
way that you could have any kind of like social freedom.
yeah,
Yeah,
social freedom. And then
was
also just like from a queer perspective, it's like, okay, like how do I get away with like living with my best friend who I sleep in the same bed with? Like it's like, well, I've already been married. Like now we're just, you know, two
just hanging
gals.
out.
Like,
Yep.
yeah, right.
Two widows finding comfort in each other in a totally platonic
Right. And
way.
we sleep in the
Yeah.
same bed, we share a bathtub. It's not weird. That's just what two gal pals do.
Exactly. Yeah, historical romance, that's a good one. I mentioned earlier, I think like Jasmine Guillory often writes
Mm.
female main characters who are kind of age ambiguous. Like sometimes I think
Hmm.
she doesn't like age them. Um, but I think they're exclusively in their 30s. Like I think even in the
Yeah.
wedding date, she's in her early 30s. And then in some of the books, the characters are like in their late 30s,
Hmm.
maybe even early 40s. And I always like loved that about her books. And so I know she tends to write some older characters. And then I was just thinking of someone. I was like looking at my shelf and being like, oh, Anita Kelly, I think also
Yeah.
has a couple books where the characters are a bit older. I think their self-pubbed book called Heart Waves centers on
Mm.
40-year-old protagonists.
Hmm. That sounds right. Yeah, because that's been on my like TBR for a while. I remember
Yeah,
them talking about it.
yeah. And I think in both of those cases, it makes sense. Like, I think because Jasmine Guillory and Anita Kelly are both in their 40s. And
Hmm.
so, like, of course, it makes sense that they are like writing older
Yeah.
protagonists. I think what's surprising, and we didn't talk about this earlier when we were talking about why there are so many young protagonists, is that like romance authors are actually often very young.
Right. Okay. Oh, okay. See, I thought you were gonna say like romance authors are often. older, like it's older
There's
authors writing.
diversity,
Yeah, yeah.
but like I think about one of my favorite romance novels of this year is the Build a Boyfriend Project by Mason Deaver. It's like so fantastic. And like I know that they just had a birthday, so like maybe they're 27 or something, but like they are young, right? And so like yeah, their characters aren't like in their 30s, like they're not in their 30s.
Yeah.
Or Timothy Janowski is another one of my favorite romance authors. Um, yeah, and he's like 28, I think. I'm sorry for like, I don't know, like outing people's ages. I don't know. Is that like
No,
not
I
okay?
know.
But I'm always surprised by, I think some romance authors are like
Yeah.
they're writing younger characters because like that's what they know.
Yeah,
And
right.
writing
Right.
characters who are older than you sometimes, I think like
That's a lot harder.
yeah, it can be more challenging, or also just like we don't think to do it as much.
Hmm.
I think in general, we just gravitate more towards telling stories about characters who are like in a place in their life that like either we are currently in or like we've already been.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah.
think that makes a difference. But I'm trying to think of other books that I have read recently with older protagonists. Um,
Is that a dog?
oh yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, no, no.
Oh,
Listen, if the dog comes in and you would like to hold the dog up for the camera,
none of my dogs are holding size. We
oh,
we have
tragic.
three dogs. We're those kind of lesbians. And they're all like the smallest one is a golden retriever that's 50 pounds.
Oh,
So yeah, they're not hold up
they're
for the
not
camera dogs.
holdable.
They would be like move the entire
Yeah.
computer to like try to show you them. But
Yeah.
yes, I knew they were sorry. I knew they were gonna bark
No,
at
no,
some
no, that's
point.
fine.
And then that golden retriever just walked by like, I wasn't barking. Like
What are you talking about? No,
I was fine.
I have to be in a room that has two doors because otherwise my cats will like throw themselves against the door and be like, "Let me in!" And then
Yes.
5 minutes later, of course, we'll be like, "I would like to leave now. Please now also get
Yeah,
up to
that's
let me
why
leave."
I was like, I'm just gonna leave the door ajar because like if they have the opportunity to come in, they usually are fine. But if
Right.
I close, I have like French doors in my office. It's like, and if I close that door and lock them out, they are just gonna like stand there and beg to come in the whole time.
Hmm.
So the answer is I have not been paying enough attention to who is writing older
Yeah.
characters in romance, but I do feel like the typical age range is like
Yeah.
27 to like 32. Feels like that's pretty common. I don't know these hockey romances, I think. Are the hockey romances the college romances? Is that
I feel like there's a lot of crossover. It's not
okay?
quite like the Venn diagram is not quite a circle.
Because I just have never, I don't recall, I've like never read a hockey romance. And so you could tell me that all hockey romances like have a secret alien twist in them, and I would be like, oh, okay. Like I had no idea.
Listener, if you have a hockey romance with a secret alien twist, like please let like if somehow, I don't know, like he's super good at hockey because he uses like his suckers to like pick up I would like to
Yeah, you'd be
slide into your
interested in that.
DMs. Let me
Yeah,
know. Although speaking of hockey and queer romance, the fact that there's not more like queer, like sapphic hockey romance,
I know. I'm not the right person to like write
it
it because
feels
I
wrong. Yeah.
literally know nothing about any sport. Like I don't know how I would ever write a sports romance. The research involved alone would be overwhelming. Um, but the reason I don't tend to read hockey romance is like
Yeah.
I know there's some good hockey romance out there,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I yeah, overwhelmingly it's like straight. So I'm like, eh.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not a sports person. I recently read this book called Love and Sports Ball, which I think is supposed to be a play on like love and basketball, but it's a
Yeah,
sapphic like basketball like because the
I've seen
WNBA is
this
so
one.
gay. And
Yeah.
the one character in it, the like one of the heroines, she's like a athletic trainer. And she's like, I don't care about sports. I don't know anything about basketball. I'm here by accident. Like, I
Yeah.
just happened to get a job one day at like a high school sports, and now I'm the athletic trainer for a WNBA team. And she's like, I'm sorry. I love you, but I don't know anything about sports. And I was like, this is the most relatable
I
character.
always feel like the true testament is like if a sports romance can make me care about the sport, like that is like God tier writing. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
for me, that's Anita Kelly's like How You Get the Girl is like a
Mm,
basketball romance. And I was like
yeah.
invested. Or like The Prospects by KT Hoffman,
Yeah.
which is like a baseball romance. And I was like, I was so in it. And I was like, I do not care about baseball, but
Yep.
I care about these characters. So here we are.
Well, with your book, I was like, should I? I was like, which one of my friends do I know that likes walking that I can ask if they want to do the Camino?
Yeah, I highly recommend it. It's
Yeah, yeah, because you've
fantastic.
done the Camino, right? I feel like
Yeah,
I vaguely remember there. I like remember you posting about it or something.
yeah. I did the same Camino path that the characters do on every step she takes. So like the Portuguese coastal route of the
Hmm.
Camino from like Porto to Santiago. I did that in May 2022. And
Okay.
so um, that like heavily informed the book and their trip. But I highly recommend it. It's not a sport at
Yeah.
all. That's just walking.
No, right. It's just walking.
It's yeah.
It's just a lot of walking. Yeah.
It is a lot of walking, for sure. But I love I love that experience. And so
But you definitely succeeded in making me want to do. I feel like it's adjacent enough to sports. Like you're saying, like
yeah,
the writing's good when you makes you interested in the sport. I'm here to tell you that I was like, "Hmm."
I would walk 200 miles. Good. That's honestly what I hope the book does for people. It's like I hope it makes them like I don't actually care if they do the Camino or not like that, you know.
Yeah.
But I think what as I was writing it, like as much as possible, I wanted to like capture what that experience was like.
Well, you definitely succeeded. Okay, so I have a few other older heroine romances. I have 40,
Recommendations? Oh,
yes. So I have 40 Love by Olivia Dade,
oh yeah.
which is not queer, but it's plus size rep because I feel like all of Olivia Dade's heroines are plus sized. And it's like she's on vacation in like Hawaii or something. It's been a while since I read it, but she's on vacation in like Hawaii and she has like a steamy affair with her tennis instructor. So there's also
I love that for her.
your sports romance. And I'm like, yeah. I think their meet cute is like she's like having like a sunrise swim and like her bathing suit top falls off and he like shields her breasts with his, hunky body. So I was like, that's all I could ask for.
That's amazing.
And then the Kingmaker, the All the King's Men duology by Kennedy Ryan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I think I want to say all the women in Kennedy Ryan's new series
Yes.
are also older, but I couldn't remember their exact ages. Um, but I want to say they're in their late 30s at the
Possibly
youngest.
40s, because I know the first one, like she has teenage
She has
kids.
teenage
And
kids,
they were
exactly.
like, and they didn't get married until like it's like a second chance. I think it's called Before I Let Go, Listener. And they didn't get married until like in their 20s. And now they're
Yeah.
divorced and they have teenage kids. So yeah, they're
I think
definitely,
they're
I
in
feel
their
like 40.
40s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so,
Yes.
and that is just like one of the best books I've ever
It's
read.
so
So,
good. It's,
so good.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
Kennedy Ryan is incredible.
I'm like, why does anyone else write Kennedy
I feel
Ryan's
that way
heroes?
sometimes.
Like,
I
what's the
read,
point?
especially when I listened to that book, I was like, oh, I will never, ever write something like
I will
this.
never be Kennedy Ryan.
But that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
I may be okay with that. Like, it was, yeah, that's an amazing book. So
Yeah.
that's a good recommendation.
And then my last one is A Tale of Two Florists by Brenna Bailey, which is sapphic. And they're like older. Like I think they're in their 60s.
Oh, I don't think because I was going to say, I don't think I've heard of that book, but I feel like that's a misstep on my part because
Yeah.
Sapphic, A Tale of Two Forests is what it's called.
Yes, by Brenna
Okay.
Bailey.
Okay.
And they're
Putting
older.
that one. Yeah.
File that away for later.
Filed for sure.
Yeah. But that's the end of my list. Did you have a brain blast?
Uh-uh.
I feel like you've been kind of spitting out some like as you've remembered them.
Yeah, I feel like I should know more, but I think also maybe the age of protagonist is something that often like leaves my
Hmm.
brain after I read a book,
Yeah. Fair enough.
like all the other details of the book itself.
Well, right. I'm like, I read a book and I'm like, that was amazing. That was the best thing I've ever read. And if someone asked me what it was about,
Like I can barely remember the names of characters like in the books I write by the time they like are published. People will be like, all right, let's talk about this book. And I'll be like, I don't know, I haven't read that book in like six
you're like,
months.
I'm two books from
I don't
now.
know. I don't
Like,
know what happens in that one. Let's see how this goes. So yeah, no, I feel like it's hard to remember those details, but I think there are books where like the age of the character is like
right,
more relevant to the
right,
book or like it stands out in some way. And so in
right,
those
right.
cases, I tend to note it, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard, like when I was like just like trying to refresh my memory, like looking up older heroine books, like there's like lists of them, but then a lot of times they don't give the age. So I'm like, okay, but what are you considering
Yeah,
old?
yeah.
I'm like, what is your metric? Because I don't know if it fits. You said you're working on book five. Has that been announced?
No, I can say nothing about that at this point. It's so hard to say because the issue is
Right.
that like I am someone who like my books change a lot throughout the drafting process. And so this book is like still in the works. It's still
Hmm.
being written, which means like nothing about it is actually set in stone. Including right, like
Right.
right now they're
Right. You were saying the
40.
ages.
Yeah, they're
Like,
40 and I'm like I'll have a meeting with my editor soon, hopefully, to talk about it. And I'm like, I might change it. I think it actually might make more sense for like the plot of the book for them to be 30. And so
yeah.
I yeah, those kinds of I mean and like honestly that's a small detail compared to the kinds of things I often change throughout the drafting
Mhm.
process. So like when I started writing Every Step She Takes, right, which is about these two women on the Camino, like it was originally about like a study abroad program.
Oh.
And yeah, and so and like a tour through like multiple countries in Europe, and like they were both teaching um at this like summer study abroad program. So it was like
Very different.
totally different
Very
concept.
different.
Like so yeah, things change a lot.
All right. Well, it's Sapphic. Listener, you heard it here first. Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. It was so good
Oh
having
yeah,
you
thank you so
on
much for having me.
again.
I appreciate it so much.
Yeah. Can you let everyone know where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me on Instagram at Alison Cochrun or on my website, also just AlisonCochran.com.
You got the easy, your name was available,
Yeah,
like
like
with the handles.
thankfully, with both my first and last name, they are spelled like slightly unusual. Like
Hmm.
Allison with one L is not common. And my last name is actually usually spelled with like an A-N at the end.
Mm.
I know. So it really came in handy when I was like
Yeah.
securing online domain, like when I
Yeah.
became an author and I was like, all right, I gotta like see if all these things are
Yeah.
out there. And they were.
Perfect. Kismet.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
exactly.
But yeah, listener, I think every step she takes will be out or either will be about to come out when this episode comes out. So either way, pre-order it, or if it's already out, go to your local
Just go
indie or
get
your
it.
Barnes
It's
and
there.
Noble and check it out. Wow, okay. That was a lot of fun. I feel like we started at older heroines and then we kind of just went all over the place. And honestly, that's what's been really great about these sort of like author topic driven Rex at the end format episodes is that I go in with kind of an idea of what I want to talk about, but each author brings their own take and their own perspective, and we talk about things that I didn't imagine. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have a topic or an author that you would like to come on the podcast, please feel free to recommend it. If you have a recommendation for a book that you think fits this, the rec theme, um, let me know. Slide into those DMs or email me or leave it in your review. And as always, if you have a book that you want us to talk about, want us to do a deep dive on, slide in with those recs as well. As always, you can find the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at We Read It One Night. You can email me, we read it one night at gmail.com. And wherever you're listening, please leave a rating and a review of the podcast. It helps us so much. And make sure that you're downloading the episodes, because those are the metrics that count. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Godspeed, comrades.